I am going to post the new link into chat as soon as you guys jump on over there. We'll continue on. So again, apologies for the confusion.
Okay. Hi, all. Can you hear me? All right. If you can hear me, type yes into chat. Awesome. We're having a few technical difficulties, as you can clearly see. But what I'm really excited about is having the know-how to just think on the fly, improvise, and keep on moving forward, which I think is such a key skill for everything in life. So we are going to do just that right now. Matt is signing on to the webinar here on this link. And Matt, I'm going to have you join in again. And in the meantime, as Matt was saying, this is a workshop to build your resume, to actually get it done. Sit down with this time, this 1 hour block, to really knock it out. Matt has a great presentation lined up that once he joins, we'll be running through. And then each section of the resume is what we'll work on together. At home, you'll pull up your resume, you'll have it, and we'll all be working on the same section at the same time, just on our own resume. And the goal is that for each section, you can ask questions, post it into chat, share suggestions, share ideas. And by the end of this 1 hour block, you should have a resume you feel pretty good about. And I'm really excited about that one. So let me see how Matt could join in one more time. And then we will go ahead and get started. So does everyone have your resume up and ready to be worked on? Let's start there. Okay, I'm going to, perfect. We are going to present the slides, and Matt should be joining. Okay, in the meantime, we're going to keep on going. So this was the first title slide. Matt introduced himself as a content developer here on the careers team. And the overview of this session we went over already. Aligning yourself for the job. These are the sections. Aligning yourself for the job, identifying yourself with that basic information, listing out your projects, showing your experience, and adding your education. And we are going to be walking through each of these sections with a dedicated set of time to focus on that, just on that section and getting it done. So that first bit that we just did was aligning yourself for the job, where we asked each of you to identify, hey, what is that job title that you're going after? And for that job title, what are the top 3 skills that employers are looking for? Because that's what you want your resume to convey. And so that was that first section where we already identified and put into chat the job title you're looking at and the key skills that you want to have come through in your resume. Those are your resume's success criteria. And so now we're moving on to the second part of identifying yourself and making it very clear how to get in contact with you, who you are, all of that. And this is really an easy win. This is the first bit where you all should have your basic contact information on your resume. This is just one recommendation that we've gone through where we have your town, your number, your email, and then links. You can hyperlink to your LinkedIn profile, your GitHub profile, rather than write it all out. And so that first purpose of that section was to get you all to work on this bit and really knock that out. So if you're done with this top identify yourself section, then go ahead and put into chat like, yes, I'm ready to move on. If you need more time, just put in need more time. And we'll give about 2 minutes. I know everyone is still hopping across different YouTube live links. So we'll give about 2 minutes for that to sort itself out. And in the meantime, make sure that you're really happy with how you have your basic identifying information and that you know your game plan. You know your target job position and those top 3 skills that you'll want to convey. Great. So let's go on to this next bit then that we have here. So we are going to keep on going. I see that, yes, this is a very easy, it's a very easy section, which is great. So we're going to keep on going, and that's correct. In the US, don't include a photo. For everywhere else, if it's relevant for your country, then you would want to include a photo. All right. This next part is where you're going to list out your projects. And for those projects, it's all about transferable skills, right? So this may be your very first job as an Android developer or as a machine learning engineer, and you haven't worked in that before. That's okay, because all of those skills that you've built across your work experience or across your university experience or just life experience, that translates here too. So for example, if you worked previously in accounting and finance and you're trying to move into software testing, you may think that that's a huge leap, but it's actually not. In order to succeed in accounting and finance, you need to have attention to detail. You need to have documentation. You need to have built up those set of skills that would actually make you a really excellent software tester or QA tester. And being able to tell that story of how your past experience has set you up to succeed in this new experience is part of the main role of the resume, is to tell that story. In the same way with the next example, say that you're in retail and customer service, say that you were a barista or a waitress or what have you. There's a lot of key skills involved in that job that you need to highlight and call out in a way where it translates to your target job. In this case, UX or UI design. In dealing with any customers, as a former waitress myself, I can say it requires a lot of creativity. It requires a lot of user satisfaction, making sure that all stakeholders are satisfied and comfortable with the solution that's been found. And so that's something that is just as relevant in UX and UI design, where you have to account for all of the different stakeholder goals for your design and make sure that everyone feels comfortable and satisfied with the end result that you're recommending. I think you get the hang of it, but I'll go over that last example again too. If you're working in healthcare in the medical fields and you want to transition to project management, there's a lot of transferable skills in that where you do need to triage, right? You do need to problem solve and find solutions under tight circumstances and delegate to the appropriate team members to resolve it. And that's exactly what a technical project manager does as well. And so those are just a few examples of transferable skills and how you can take your past experience and map it to the key skills for the job position that you're targeting. And so what that means here is that we're going to ask you to list out those different projects that you've done, whether that is a personal project, a project for school, different projects or accomplishments from your past work experience, and write out, hey, what are those key skills that this project displays? What are the key either technical skills or soft skills, which are incredibly important, that I want to communicate from this project? Why is this project relevant to the job position that I'm going after right now? And so that's what this time is for, not just a presentation for you all to listen to my beautiful voice or to Matt's very handsome voice, but to actually sit down and take this time to think, hey, what are my transferable skills? What are the skills that I have in my experience that map to the skills that this job title and job position I'm now going after, where they line up? So we're going to give you about 5 minutes, because I think getting it done is more important than getting it perfect. We're going to give you 5 minutes to write down on your own at home or put into chat, what are those top skills in your experience that match up to the skills the position's going after? And just make that list for those projects that show that experience. And we'll meet back here in chat in 5 minutes, but we'll also be on here. Okay. Yep. So you're sharing the chat right here on YouTube. And so this is really a kind of a quiet working time for you all to identify for your resume, what are those skills and experiences that you want to showcase, and to write out, very similar to how this slide that you're seeing now has it, what are those critical skills? And if anyone has an example of on their resume how you've described that, then this is a great time to put that into chat. So, yep, Nick, you can share a GitHub repo as hyperlinks for each project detail. And that's a great way for when you share it as a PDF for recruiters, if they want to learn more, to easily just click and get the full debrief. So what we're focused on now is what are those key skills for the different projects that you've done that really make a case for the position that you're out to get. So I'll be responding to a few questions just as we give you time to work on that project. And I invite everyone else to help each other too. So Yi has a comment, I'm a school teacher, not sure what transferable skills I can put for a React developer. I'm curious for the developers there on the call, on this Hangout, what do you all think? I have my own opinions. I have so much respect for teachers and think that being able to structure out your game plan, your lesson plan for the class, being able to lead that conversation and communicate goals and your vision. I think being able to think analytically and convey that analysis to others are all key skills, and there's so much more. Okay, we have about 2 more minutes. Let's keep going. And we'll go from there. Okay. So now that you have, for your own sense, an understanding of the different skills that you want to communicate, the different skills in your background that are transferable, now's the time where you can think about wordsmithing, right? How do you communicate that? And here at Udacity, one thing that we like to do is to frame them in power statements. And for the mathematically inclined in the call, there is a formula for this, where if you have an action verb, so what you did, you have qualifiers and quantifiers, which is a fancy name for numbers to show impact, and the results of that work, that all makes a really strong power statement. And so here are a few examples, or here's one example where someone has that they built 6 mobile websites using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and MoveWeb, bringing sites from ideation to launch within 3 months. So let's break that up a little bit and understand how that works. So for our verb, we have that they built those websites, right? That's a very key action, key skill, that they use these skills to do it, and that the impact or the result was that they were able to launch within 3 months, which is pretty incredible for 6 mobile websites. Here's another example. So say that you administered a personal Ubuntu server running a LAMP stack to host sites for 12 clients, successfully maintaining 100% uptime. Let's break that down and see how that works. So the action verb here, what you did was you administered that server and ran a LAMP stack, which demonstrates 2 very key skills, so that you could host sites for 12 clients. That dozen also being very important to show the breadth of your responsibility, so that you could maintain 100% uptime. This is something that we often see with resumes where they miss the core impact of the work, right? And showing a skill, you really are demonstrating that not just you can do something, but you can do it, and here's why it matters. Whether it's being able to maintain, in this case, 100% uptime, or being able to launch on schedule within 3 months, so that the rest of the business can function well. And so that's really asking, okay, not just what you can do, but why that really matters, and connecting that with the position that you're going after. Business can function well. And so here's an example of what that actually looks like before we turn it all back to you, of showing your experience, where now you focus on the projects, those key skills. If you focus on the experience, traditional work experience, for each job, what are those 3 power statements that you can write where you can point to, hey, this is what I accomplished, and I can demonstrate that it was these skills, these actions that I did that helped get me there. So take some time now to reflect on what does that look like for you. And while we do that, I am more than thrilled to hand the mic back to Matt, who sorted out all the audio and technical issues, and he'll be driving the rest of the presentation. Matt, I'll run the slides, so just say next slide. You don't even have to worry about it, and we'll keep on going from there. How's that sound?
Sounds fantastic. Hello. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 25 minutes to go ahead and work out your job title, work out your power statements for at least one of these, and then I'll try to answer some questions while y'all are working on that. So.
And I see a few questions in the chat too. And welcome back, Matt, for sure. So glad you're back. You don't need to decide between experience or projects. I think it really depends on the background that you're bringing. If you want to showcase one or two projects in more detail and really use them to demonstrate technical skills, that's something that you can do if relevant to the position you're applying for. With experience, I think it's a bit more, it's a bit broader. And I'm curious, Matt, from your perspective, what do you think about Nick's question? Are projects more valued compared to experiences?
I'd say it's pretty much depends on what position you're going for. So the more technical a position, say full stack development or something along those lines, you're going to want to show the projects because they have specific skills that are required to the whole throughout the whole process of the project. So that helps significantly when you're gearing for that type of position. However, if you're looking at more of I wouldn't say a less skilled position, but more of a specialized position in, say, let's say robotics. So robotics is a very specialized thing. You can still use your projects. You still should use your projects, but you also want to show that you have the experience that builds into that specific target. So basically what I'd say is if you, the more technical skills that are required for a position, the more important the project description is over the experience. However, your experience should still is still necessary to show that you actually have the time. You actually have a lot of experience in doing that. So I know it's I'm kind of running around in circles, but that's what I recommend.
Sure. And Andre on chat also has a great point that projects can be more important for a career change because you may not have that experience, right? And so you really do want to drive home that message that, hey, I may not have formal work experience, but I've built that experience myself through these projects to demonstrate those specific skills.
That's an excellent point. Yes. If you're just starting out, say this is your first job, or you've had that gap in experience, or like Karen pointed out, you're transitioning jobs, those projects are invaluable. Yes, your experience is important, but at that point, your experience is mostly showcasing soft skills as opposed to the hard skills. So that's a fantastic point.
That's great. And we have another comment from Denise. Hey, Denise, can you give us an example of a good project description? And I'm going to ask for the 91 people on the call, if you all have a good example from your resume, or even an example you're not sure is good, quote unquote, but you just have an example of how you've done that, I would encourage you to share that because you are each other's greatest resource here. I'm also going to ask Matt if you have good examples of project descriptions or know where students and alums can find those examples.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can get one to pull up on my screen, and just give me 1 minute.
And you can
go ahead with questions though.
Okay. And you can also share the link to me, Matt, and I can pull it up because I know I'm running the slides, all the tech.
Okay. I am not pulling it up. It's not coming up for me. So what I'll do is I will link it in the email that we're going to send out following the presentation. I will also make sure that we get that up, and I will get that out.
Sounds great. In the meantime, so for those at home who are working on it, on your job experience, continue working on that. In the meantime, let's hit some of these questions coming in on chat, Matt. So one
Okay.
is, can I use my internship as a job experience? Does that
Absolutely.
count?
Absolutely. You, you're working. The whole point of an internship is pretty much for you to be learning. So anything that you're doing during that time frame may not show length of a very long time frame in as far as like employment goes, but all of the skills are definitely something you want to capitalize on.
Mhm. Here's another one from Tony, and I'm just going to read it out, Tony. It's so I was a professional driver for 14 years. Would I just leave out my previous work experience and provide my projects? Because I can't fit all of that experience, education, and projects on a single page resume. What do you recommend, Matt?
I would recommend you're going to want to capitalize on your projects. That's where you're going to show you have the skills and the technical expertise to break into that new uh, employment. With your experience, I would still put down what you did. But when you create your power statements, focus on your soft skills that you gained through that experience. So, I mean, driving, I would assume you have a fairly good grasp on logistics, time management, I'm sure people skills. Focus on those types of soft skills and figure out how to basically use that information to steer it to, hey, I've got, all of these, I've got the capabilities. I can do this. I've got the skills. That's how you're going to want to use experience that's so vastly different from the technical field that you're moving into. So I hope that answer helps.
That's great. On a similar note, for moving into the field, if you don't have experience in it, Alberto says, what if he has no job experience in the industry that he's going into, which is VR? And he only has experimental projects and Udacity projects. Do those count as experience? And how would you recommend folding that in?
That is a very good question. And yes, so the one I wouldn't say problem, the one issue that a lot of people I run into personally, it is the number one hurdle to overcome is imposter syndrome. And if you don't have that length of experience and you don't have that breadth of experience, that just basically it chips away at your confidence. When you have something that is just, just like say you did your projects for your nano degree, that is absolutely something you want to put out there. Those are skills that you learned, those that that stuff, obviously. Use that in your resume. And like I answered with the last question, use your experience in your previous career field to point to the basically to point to say I can do this. Just it's that's really all it comes down to. Use your soft skills from your previous experience and show how you can apply those with the knowledge that you gained from your nano degree program to move forward.
Mm-hmm. And as part of that, I think that dichotomy is really interesting, actually, right? So projects can really demonstrate those hard skills very well. Experience can also demonstrate hard skills, but are great for communicating those soft skills. And so I really like this example that Alberto Gauna put into chat of one of his project descriptions to answer Denise's earlier question, achieved 81% accuracy in detecting facial key points around eyes, nose, and mouth by developing a CNN model based on a set of architecture experiments. So don't worry if your background isn't in AI and this doesn't make sense to you. The way of understanding why that description I think is so strong is that you lead with that impact or the result, right? 81% accuracy in this action. So detecting facial key points by developing a CNN model, which is that key skill. And so thank you so much for sharing that, Alberto. We have a few other questions, just as people are still working on their experience. We're getting a few where, what if people have much more experience or employers than fit on one page? How do you account for that?
That's a very good question. So with my background, I have done a lot of different jobs. And when I actually write out all my experience in chronological order, like you were taught to, everybody, that's what everybody says to do, it fills up 8 pages. And that's obviously way too much for a resume, right? So what you do, you don't want to lie, okay? But what you can do is you can pick out common threads from your employment experience. So if you like we were talking about with the transferable skills earlier, if you have that attention to detail, documentation, soft skills in your experience, pick out those examples, even if it's from 3 different positions. List those 3 different positions and use those transferable skills to show your experience. Now, if you still have too much, then you're just going to have to start prioritizing based on relevance. Still add, where you were working and when, but make sure you start whittling things away based on relevance. Now, going back to the amount of work experience you have, if you have, let's say, I was a manager at the local Taco Bell or local fast food restaurant 10 years ago, but now I'm trying to break into web development. You don't really, unless you have soft skills that directly apply to that new position, then you don't even have to mention that as experience. So really, with your experience section, you're trying to tell the story that you want the recruiter to know, not everything about your entire life story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think many analogies can be drawn from the dating scene, but one that feels especially apt now is in any conversation, right? You don't start that first date, and a resume is very much a first date,
right,
by telling them your whole life story. I was born in Boston in this year to parents from this country, and I struggled, and now I'm here. It's a first date. You first have to really communicate why you're a great person for them and really try to meet their needs and communicate the ones that you have that you can fill. So keep first dates in mind. It's not marriage quite yet. You don't have to tell all of the secrets in the closet, but
right.
more about what is most relevant that they want to know. And I think we have a few related questions on that front. What about gaps, right? What if the jobs that aren't relevant to that position that you leave out, what if that's interpreted as a gap? And what if you even do have a gap? What do you recommend for addressing that concern that employers might have of a gap?
So my personal opinion, I treat gaps no differently than I would career changes. For whatever reason, for that you left the workforce for a couple of years, or whatever the reason, things change while you're not working, right? New systems, new processes, stuff like that. So I look at it the same way as I would changing my career field. Capitalize on those soft skills again, and don't worry so much about the gap. What you can do to kind of overcome the gap is show, use your education, use your projects as a not a filler per se, but use them to show that you've still been in the game, even though you haven't necessarily been employed in the game. I know from personal experience having those gaps is frustrating, but you can work around them quite easily if you focus on telling that story that that you're still developing and you're still working, and even though you haven't been employed, you still know what's going on. That is that's my advice on career gaps.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And we have, and hello, I think you all can see my video now. We have a great question as a follow-up from Ryan of, is there a good way to explain a gap due to disability? And I think just from my own experience, again, you don't need to share the details in detail of the reasons why you took that gap. I would say that's not relevant to the conversation per se. So Matt, what would you recommend for someone when asked, say in an interview, why they took that gap? How do you respond?
That's a very good question. It's one I actually have to deal with personally, due to service-related issues. I'm actually a disabled vet, which is not an easy thing for me to talk about, but I do talk about it because I don't have to talk about it if I don't want to. It's my choice, and I'm going to make that point first. Just like Karen pointed out, you're not going to want to, tell all your secrets on the first date. But there's no harm in saying, hey, it's because I threw my back out and I was convalescing for 3 months, or I had health issues, and it took me out of the workforce for a year. There's really no shame in admitting that if you want to. Now, is it a good thing to point out? I would say no, because it is a negative, and you always want to stay positive, especially when you're talking about your resume. Now, when you get into an interview, it's a different story, but when you're talking about specifically your resume, you have a very limited amount of time, or space, I should say, to get your story in front of that recruiter, in front of the HR person that's filtering through these resumes. So you don't necessarily want to bring it up because you don't have the time or the space to go into detail and provide more explanation. So I would recommend not putting it in your resume. Later in the interview process, that might come up. Like I said, it's up to you, but try to keep things positive and moving forward. So that said, when you have a gap, just treat it like any other gap. When you have a gap, you're still working for your goals. Okay, you're still working to get the position that you're applying to. If you've got the skills, which you do, if you've got the drive, which you obviously do, then tell your story in that light, and your gap shouldn't be an issue at all.
That's great. And I think what's coming out so much in this conversation is actually how you tell that story, right? And that comes across on your resume by what you emphasize, what you don't, what you admit, and how that works together. We have a few other questions coming in, and Nick, I think you're spot on in chat. Or it says, I think when we're drafting a resume, we should think from the perspective of the recruiting officer, what that person will see and what they would interpret from the description. Is that a right approach? And I think as Divine has been responding in chat too, like that's so much of life, right? Knowing your audience, knowing who's looking at this and what they're looking for that you bring to the table, I think is a key piece of it. Matt, would you have any other thoughts there?
It's sales. That's really what you're doing. You're trying to persuade somebody to buy you. Okay, that's no negative connotation at all. You're selling yourself, as Divine just pointed out. So yeah, absolutely take your audience into factor. That's the only person you're writing for, which is also why you always want to have that resume targeted to a specific position or a specific job title, because that is part of your sales pitch. So absolutely, you're writing to the person reading your resume.
That's great.
And Sharon, Karen, I wanted to share something real quick. Going back to that example of a project, I'm gonna try and share my screen, or at least share this. Let's see if I can get this to work. All right, so here's an example of a project. Sorry, I know it says transferable skills, but I just hijacked our presentation. So you see the title, the recommendation system, and then you see what you actually did, and the whole goal was predicting the movie ratings using Movie Lens. Then a really short description of what that project was. So several different model types, task of movie rating prediction, and you have the critical skills and so on. So this is pretty much an example of how you would write your project. So, sorry, I wanted to cut that in there just to.
No, that's great. And Matt, if you have the presentation pulled up, I think we're at a good point to move on from the show experience bit and move on to the education and make progress there.
Okay, let me get there real quick.
And while you do that, I want to give a special shout out to Faraj, because Faraj is an awesome alum who's chiming in on chat and who's done a few AMAs. So hey, Faraj, I'm glad you could make it.
All right, we're going on to education. All right. Oh, come on. There we go.
And Matt, I think I have lost you again, which is why it's a good thing that I have the presentation as well.
All right, so Chrome crashed. I'm back. Let me share my presentation and we'll talk about education. All right, so education. This is actually a very easy section to take care of. There's a couple of things to note, and I'm just going to move forward. So this is how you should list your education, what the degree is from, when it was, and then relevant courses. That way you can show how your degree works to telling your story, selling yourself again. Now, you can list all of the education you've ever had, which is not bad. But degrees are starting to matter, like actual like bachelors and associates and masters. They're starting to, in most cases, especially in tech, they're starting to matter less than they did before. That said, if a position requires a bachelor's degree or requires a master's degree as a specific requirement, you are definitely going to want to put in your education experience based on what their requirements are. Definitely, and especially if you're switching careers, you're going to want to highlight your work here at Udacity. That not only is Udacity a recognized brand, it's also showing you have those technical skills, those specific technical skills to move into the tech field. So make sure you add those relevant courses, and your education should pretty much fill itself out. Do we have any questions regarding education? If we do, go ahead and add them. I'm going to give you, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes to fill out the education section. We'll still keep taking questions and answering, but go ahead and write down your education. I just thought of something when you're talking about education. One of the good things, like, okay, so I have a bachelor's degree in political science. I have no experience using any of the political science portion of my degree, but I do have other, like, I have courses within my bachelor's degree that would apply to even a tech field. So for instance, I took intro to statistics. It's a very basic course, but it's still a relevant course to the job that I'm currently applying to. So if you're going to add one of your previous degrees, look for those courses within those degrees. That'll make it more relevant to your resume.
We have a few great questions there. Udacity degree is a simple one. Thanks, Andre. So one simple to include, definitely. But what about other small courses? Like if I do a short course on Scrum practices, does that count?
Yes, absolutely. That's education. In fact, a lot of those, especially coming from a workforce development background, a lot of those really shape your capabilities. And for Scrum, if you're talking about software development and let's say you have the technical skills, having Scrum is the make or break between, say, an entry-level position and a senior level position or an intermediate level position, because you have, if you're a certified Scrum Master, I mean, that's huge, because you're very good at project management. I mean, you're certified for it. If you just took a course and you have a certificate, but okay, let me back up. If you took a course, but you're not a certified Scrum Master, but you do have experience with Scrum, that actually increases your value to the recruiter. And Scrum is also one of those keyword search terms. So adding that to your resume can help you from that perspective.
That's great. And I think that actually helps answer a question that came in from Dananjay. What about courses on Illustrator and Premiere and so on? And I think a great way of thinking about that is, as Divine puts into chat, know your audience, right? If Illustrator, Premiere, if those courses you took are relevant to that position and would help you succeed in that position, then great. If the courses you took are more like music appreciation or painting 101, unless you're out on your resume, your goal is to get into music appreciation, then might not be as relevant. So I think that's a great way of deciding that. And Matt, we have a few other questions on GPAs. Are you required to include your GPA, and does it hurt you if you don't include your GPA in this education section?
So there's nothing keeping you from doing it. I've not run into a situation where it would necessarily hurt you unless your GPA is like ridiculously low, like 1 point and 1.0 and below. That might be an issue, but in all reality, the face of resumes in this regard is changing. More and more employers care less about the degree. In fact, I believe Elon Musk recently, within the last week or so, made a comment that he doesn't give a darn about your degree as long as you've got the skills or something to that effect. That's becoming more and more irrelevant. The GPA is becoming more and more irrelevant to require on your resume. So if you have a concern about your GPA being an issue, don't add it. You're not going to get, it's not going to be negative. And if it is an issue, then you can add it at a different time, but you don't have to you don't have to tell everything on the first date.
Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe might relate to another question as we take a step back and think about the education section in context of the whole resume and how it relates to what you're looking for. We have a great question from Ryan where he says he's gotten issues from recruiters in the past because his current job title is media director, which has nothing to do with software development. And I imagine that if your education is also completely different from the field that you're going into, how would you recommend framing the experience you have in a way that resonates with where you're trying to go?
That's a very good question. So not knowing the specifics of what you do in the day-to-day, being a media director requires a level of attention to detail and a level of skill that it's a specialized track. Mm-hmm. Moving over to say software development from that is a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. What you'd still want to do is pick out those key responsibilities as a media director and capitalize on those in your experience section and tie them into the hard skills that are in your project section or even in your experience section. It really comes down to, if you've got the hard skills, you get into that interview, you can do it. Even if a recruiter says that doesn't make any sense, you've got the skills, you've got what it takes to excel in that job, and that's really what you want to do is use that confidence to sell yourself. I know I'm not giving you a whole lot of like specifics of what you should do, but I am reiterating it. You have to find the common links between your previous employment experience and what you're trying to break into.
So here's a somewhat related question as we focus on this education section and keeping on that theme of choosing what's relevant and highlighting that. There's a bit of debate going on chat around hobbies. So things that are more personal, not necessarily a skill, but personal hobbies. What's your stance on whether to include that or not in a resume where real estate is very limited?
That is an excellent question, and one that I personally have dealt with. My hobby is I like messing around with Adobe After Effects and creating graphics. Really into content development too much, so it's not something I would necessarily add on my resume. But the beautiful thing about modern technology is the ability to hyperlink to my LinkedIn page. So as soon as a recruiter, and trust me, they check your, they check your profiles. If you add your LinkedIn profile to your resume as a hyperlink and they click on it, then like I said before, that opens up an in and out of real estate to add all your hobbies, all your interests, projects. You can even share videos and presentations and of the work that you've actually done. And because you're the one that's interested in those hobbies and you're interested in the job, say software development or web development, you're the one that is actually in your brain merging those two seemingly unrelated topics together. You've already started doing that on your own time. That's where you get to use that's the benefit of having your LinkedIn account, because you can show that stuff without taking up the real estate on a traditional resume.
I think that's key. And just speaking from my own experience as a hiring manager in the past, when you look at many different resumes, they all start to look very similar. If it's for the same position and they're demonstrating similar skills across them, what's always stood out to me is where they list out things that are personal to them that make them feel very human, and also help me better understand who they are and what they're into and looking for. I can give an example of one that really stood out. This is for someone I hired who was about 3 or 4 years outside of college, but he included that he was the captain of his college's basketball team under the hobby section. And that's something that stood out to me because that requires so much skill. You have to tell people what to do, but get them excited about it. You have to get them to feel like a team and act as a team. And it really helped me see how he had skills in other ways that maybe don't come across in his work experience, right? I think the same way others who have hobbies in like bowling club or other aspects of their lives that help really make them human to the recruiter, well, also it's a small detail that can stand out and help you stand out from the crowd.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have about 4 minutes left. Do we want to, maybe it's a good time to move from the education to the next steps?
Let's go ahead and wrap this up. So you should by now, if you don't have it all filled out, if you don't have all of your experience that you want to put on there on your resume or projects, you at least should have an example of what you need. So at this point, once you complete, once it's all filled out, you have a completed resume, right? At least a draft resume. It could be targeted to a specific position, or it could be targeted to a job title. But this is a template from which to for you to work off of for tweaking it for future positions. Now, with Udacity, we have, when you're enrolled in a nano degree program, you've got your career portal. And you have a submit your resume project where we actually review your resume and provide you detailed and personalized feedback from our experts. So now that you have your draft resume, there's nothing keeping you from submitting it to complete your project. We also have career services here at Udacity. So if you wanted to get a professional resume review, we have those available. So check out the careers, check out your career portal, or check out the careers services section on the Udacity homepage, and you'll be able to get more details. But you've got that resume ready for review. And at this point, especially if you already targeted a specific position, you can start your job search. You can submit it and be confident that you've got a solid working resume. And the whole, like I said at the beginning, the whole goal is to get you that interview, get you that job. So go ahead and go out there and carpe diem. We have a couple other events coming up. I figured I'd take the time to kind of advertise for our Career Month events going on right now. So it was that Friday, we have a cover letter writing webinar, and the 21st, we also have a Building Your Brand by Telling Your Story webinar. And as a personal promo, you can find these events on our YouTube pages, or go to udacity.com. And as a personal promo, on Thursday, September 20th, we're going to be having a networking workshop with yours truly. So if you're interested in getting the jump up on your networking, join us then, and we'd absolutely happy to have you there. So with that, I'm gonna hang around for a couple more minutes, answer a couple more questions. But I thank you for showing up. Thank you for being part of this experience. I apologize for the technical difficulties today, but thankfully Karen was able to step up and really help me out today, to help you guys out. So if there's any other questions, go ahead. I'll stick around for another 5 minutes or so, and if not, then good luck.
That's great. And so we'll hang around the next 2 minutes while we're here until 10:30 Pacific. As Matt mentioned, for that resume, now that you have a draft, for many of you, if you're an alum, a Udacity alum, you have a free resume review that you can redeem right now if you go into your career portal. So if you go to Udacity and log into the classroom and click on that briefcase icon on the left, you should see that you have a free resume review just waiting for you to get feedback on the great work that you've already put here. It never hurts to get another set of eyes, never hurts to get another opinion. So if you're an alum of a Career Ready Nano Degree program, be sure to claim that before it expires on September 30th. And any other questions or concerns, we'll be here another minute to put in. But otherwise, thanks you all for joining. We'll share the link to the presentation in the thank you email. And for that last extra question from Rasha, should we add references to the resume?
No. References, take that to your interview. Don't add them to your resume. If they don't ask, don't give them. Just like our dating analogy, they can meet your parents later. So that's my advice.
That's great advice. Another question from Perry is, how many jobs should I be applying for each day?
When I was right in the thick of my job search, I was probably putting out 6 to 8 applications a day. But I tell you, I had absolutely no personal life. My wife and my kids definitely did not appreciate that. So what I would say is focus on quality over quantity. If you can only get one done in a day, that's fine. You've got another, you've got another opportunity out there. But most importantly, make sure that you're targeting it correctly and effectively, and it actually helps you in the long run because it wastes less of your time. So focus on your quality over your quantity, but there's no specific number. Just do whatever it is, whatever you can handle is what you should do.
Okay, and final question from Shiram. I saw you posted this earlier. We didn't get to it. I've worked in 2 different teams in my current job. How do I put that in my resume since the role changes on a need-by-need basis?
That's a good question. That was actually a really big issue with me when I was transitioning out of the military, because I might have been in one team at one place, and I'm still employed in the military, and I moved to a different team doing a different task. So I can definitely relate to that. What I would suggest is do a highlights or a Cliff's Notes of your time at that company. So if, unless you have a significant promotion, you should be able to say, hey, I was employed at, company X for 2 years, and then, divide those power statements up, those bullet points, to encompass all of the skills that you did, and don't really detailing that, oh, hey, this was between 2 different teams or 3 different teams. Just make sure you get all of those skills in there under that work experience section.
Okay, thank you so much. And we're about at time now for real. I've posted into chat the link that you can just click directly if you're an alum or a student to see the resume review project where you can submit. So I'm going to encourage everyone, if you're participating in the Kickstart Your Job Hunt Challenge and the goal this week is to knock out that resume, go ahead and submit it. Mark that done. Get that second pair of eyes and get the confidence you need to keep moving forward. And so then right now, I'm going to officially call time. Thank you, Matt. Thank you all in the audience. Thanks for bearing with us and really thinking on your feet. And I look forward to seeing your final resume, seeing what you're done. If you're an alum, be sure to post that in the alumni Slack workspace. If you're a student, share it with us otherwise. And thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone.
Okay.